partner? Are you a parent? Are you a student? We want to know. So know who we're speaking with. It's hard, when you're in a Zoom, but we want to feel like we're all sitting in the same room. So please feel free to put that in the chat. All right, let's see. Do we got anybody still in the waiting room?
Yeah, we got more people in there.
All
There's still
right.
some folks trickling in, but I'm keeping an eye on it.
Cool. Awesome. Awesome. We are going to go ahead and get started because you chose 5 o'clock to be with us. So welcome everyone to our second virtual training for our education summit. We are so excited that you all are here today. My name is Megan Frierson. I am K Connect's Director of System Building. This is our opportunity to get to engage with you before Saturday's event. I hope you have registered. Saturday, we have our official education summit at the Grand Rapids Center for Community Transformation in Grand Rapids, April 19th, starting at 10 a.m. to 1:30. And so this, my friends, is preparing ourselves for that momentous occasion. We are bringing in students, community, legislators, parents, you all, you name it. We're bringing you all together all around student well-being. And we know now more than ever, student well-being is very important and top of mind of our students. In today's virtual session, some of you, okay, we have different levels there. We might have some pros at advocacy. We might have some beginners, some a little nervous because this is their first time. What can you do? What can't you do? That's what today is about. You hear it all the time now, use your voice. Well, how do you use your voice? So that's exactly what today's advocacy training is around. Consider it like an advocacy boot camp. Before we dive in to our special guest, I would like to introduce you all to our co-host coming all the way live and in color from Lansing. So I'm going to kick it all over to you, Chris.
All right. Hey, so thank you and good evening, everyone. As mentioned earlier, my name is Chris Cadogan, and I'm honored to serve as, I guess, a co-MC. And before I jump into some agenda stuff, I have to tell you, just like Miss Megan said, we've got a really, really powerful lineup of super amazing people with some really, really insightful lenses. But I will say something about me. I'm a K-4 principal in the great city of Lansing, just about 5 minutes from the state's capital and the House and Senate floors. And my school isn't just a geographical center of political action, it's also an urban school that relies heavily on federal Title I funds, serves students from diverse backgrounds, and operates in the midst of a statewide teacher shortage. So in many ways, my school, like many of yours, is living in the intersection of education policy every day. So it's with that context that I have the privilege of being part of this amazing forum where I get to wear two hats, one as the administrator and one as an education advocate. And it's a role that I've learned to embrace and steward over the years, and especially during my time as a K Connect policy fellow. K Connect's powerful collective impact mission continues to remind me of how critical it is to center the unique perspectives and identities of our communities. When we bring those pieces together, we can do truly transformative, sustainable, and powerful work that betters our city, our state, and nation. Now, we've got a full agenda ahead of us and with some incredible guest speakers in the house. But before we dive in, we want to hear you. So we're going to do an icebreaker of sorts really quickly, if we could, in the chat. Most of you guys have put your name, but add your role in the community. By that, I mean, are you an educator, parent, a nonprofit partner? Then take just 5 minutes to drop a word in the chat that describes the feeling or disposition or mindset you're bringing into the space for as you come into the space. For me, the word I would use is excited, or as my students say, or used to say, lit. Now they would say I'm cheesy for saying that, but I genuinely look forward to learning from and engaging with the amazing voices we have with us tonight. So my next step will be to briefly go over the agenda. So really quickly, for the agenda, we've just taken care of our welcome and K Connect overview. We'll move on from there, review Kent County shared policy agenda. We'll then jump into Advocacy 101, led by Jamie and Amari from MLPP. We'll pause and I'll help facilitate some more crowd engagement. And then we will go into engaging in advocacy and looking at the opportunity index with Mr. Jeff Cobb from EdTrust Midwest. And finally, we'll conclude our night with doing some Q&A. Before we do that, it's really important. We were all maybe on computers during the pandemic, and so we learned a new word, and that's norms. And so I look to just kind of talk about some of our norms. First, assume positive intent. We're all here to listen to others' perspectives and share our thoughts respectfully. Actively engage and participate. We'd love for your cameras to be on as much as you can. So share your thoughts in the chat by unmuting yourself, and don't be afraid to ask questions as well. Give your input and share your personal experiences. Speak your truth without blame or judgment. Participants commit to expressing their thoughts and opinions while actively listening to others, promoting constructive dialogue and avoiding disrespectful language or behavior. Welcome and manage discomfort. Hey, look, we're going to talk about some stuff that is difficult. We're talking about education, and we expect to be doing so with open hearts and educated minds. And if you feel like the topic is making you feel triggered or heavy, beautiful thing about being online is you can just mute yourself, mute your video, and walk away. And then come back because we got really dope speakers. Welcome and look at every issue from multiple perspectives. We all have different expertise and lived experiences. Let's try to consider a situation from a point of view different from others, different from ours as well. And now I'm going to pass it back to the co-hostess with the mostest, Miss Megan.
Right. Thank you so much, Chris. And one thing I do want to share with you all is that we are not alone. We have the K Connect backbone team. Yep, that's what we're called. They are on this call today to support in many different ways. So in our chat, which I have a box that will not allow me to see what's happening in the chat, and I'm supposed to be managing. So I have thank you. I got my partners. So I got Stephanie Salamoni with K Connect. I have Dr. Shayla Young. I have Katie in there as well. We have Deshaun that's doing the slide deck. So we have the K Connect team that is truly holding us down today. So you're probably wondering, okay, K Connect, okay, why are we so interested in policy and advocacy? Why are we having this today? And the reason why is that we are a collective impact organization. Which means, you know what, y'all, we bring everybody together to have these deep discussions, to be able to understand what's at the forefront, what the Kent County is facing. We want to make sure that we're having those conversations, facilitating that discussion, and then also creating some really impactful strategies where we see gaps. And so that is what we do by bringing our different leaders and community partners like yourselves together. We are all into student well-being because we realize that there are inequities and there are issues that surround that area. And so when we do look at many of these issues and we are developing these strategies, we want to make sure that we are doing it with community and not for community. So as a body, we are a network of 150 plus partners, many of you on the call. So shout out to those. I see some of those that are part of our work groups. Our overall mission is to ensure that all children and family in Kent County have an equitable path from cradle to career. So I'm talking about being born healthy all the way past age 30. So making sure that you have that thriving family income, okay? We have a work plan that spans across the cradle career journey. And a lot of this information is grounded in data. We have our data dashboard that maps out the journey in real time, breaks it down by race and ethnicity, from kindergarten readiness all the way over to thriving family income. To learn more about K Connect, which I would be honest, if we talked about K Connect, we could take over this whole 2-hour call. I would love to get an opportunity to be with you and share more, especially if you're interested in being involved. And we'll make sure that we include our information in the chat before we jump off. So now let me turn it over to, at this time, I'd like to bring in Renelle Weathers, an independent policy consultant and a chair of K Connect's Policy and Advocacy Work Group. Renelle has over 18 years experience in public policy and helping organizations navigate the legislative and political landscape. So she is truly the best one, y'all, for this call. As the first community engagement director for Michigan League for Public Policy, she worked with organizations nationally and throughout the state to increase their knowledge of state and local processes to advance policy goals. So let me tell you, Renelle has a wealth of knowledge, and that's why we always love bringing her into the policy discussions. Manel is motivated by the belief that each of us has a role, each of us, to play for betterment of our community. We all do have a role, and I really truly hope that we all see that on the call today. Her expertise has helped to shape K Connect's policy agenda, which helps us to advance equitable outcomes for children and families in Kent County. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it all on over to you, Renelle.
Thank you so much, Megan. I started to cut you off halfway through, but all is good. Good evening, everyone. And so happy to see so many of you join us at such an important time in our advocacy life and civic engagement. And I've been involved in civic engagement and advocacy most of my life. I became more dedicated with the importance of community advocacy after personally observing how corporate lobbyists used and misled community folks to get policies passed that many times did not benefit community. And I was determined to find a way to help folks understand their power. So as one of the chairs of the Policy and Advocacy Work Group for the last 2 years, we've worked alongside a Connect Network backbone team, and they are amazing, and the MLPP, and the Michigan League for Public Policy, which will be on just after me, building a policy agenda that is reflective of the needs of the network, ultimately serving children and families of Kent County. And these are the 7 priorities from the policy agenda. Access to affordable and quality childcare. K-Connect is committed to advancing accessible and quality childcare solutions by advocating for affordability, quality, and children's and providers' well-being. We believe all families in Kent County must have access to affordable and quality childcare, and childcare providers have the support and opportunities to thrive. Access to paid and family leave. K-Connect prioritizes family well-being by advocating for equitable policies and recognizing the importance of supporting individuals during life transitions. We believe that all employees must have access to paid family and medical leave, and all employers, whether small or large businesses, can offer paid leave without adverse impact. Equity in K through 12 education funding. K-Connect is dedicated to promoting educational equity by advocating for fair and adequate funding for vulnerable schools and districts, ensuring every student has access to a quality education regardless of socioeconomic status. We believe that all children must have access to a high-quality educational experience in schools where funding is equitable. Equity in teacher compensation. K-Connect champions fair and increased teacher pay as a vital component of educational equity, recognizing the essential role educators play in shaping the future. Our approach includes addressing racial and geographical disparities in teacher wages. Access to comprehensive school-based supports. K-Connect is committed to fostering the well-being of students by advocating for comprehensive mental health support and K-12 education, ensuring every child has access to the resources they need to thrive. Increased access to post-secondary opportunities. K-Connect advocates for universal access to financial aid for all high school seniors, ensuring equitable opportunities for post-secondary education and empowering students to pursue their academic aspirations without financial barriers. And 7, access to wraparound supports in post-secondary. K-Connect strives to ensure every student's success by championing increased college graduation rates through a collaborative community effort and statewide initiatives. And for most of you, maybe all of you on this Zoom, session, believe in those 7 priorities are important for our families and children to thrive. And so, and tonight, this evening, we're going to emphasize some of those priorities related to student well-being, such as the Opportunity Index. As Megan mentioned, one of the things I say a lot and often, and will continue to repeat, we all have a role to play to help shape the future for our children. There's a quote by Alice Walker I many times use. The most common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any. Right. So I want you to remember, you have power. Continue to equip and educate yourselves and advocate. Right. I want to remind you, now I remind myself often, that children are 20% of our population, but they're 100% of our future. Right. And what are we doing to help shape their future to where it should be? And I'm gonna turn it back over to, I think it's Chris.
Yes, ma'am. Hey, thank you so much, Ms. Rennell, for all the impactful work that you do. Next, I'd like to introduce Jamie. And Jamie joined the Michigan League for Public Policy in January of 2019. Jamie is the Community Engagement Director at MLPP. Jamie leads the league's work with organizations around the state to connect the impact of budget and tax policies to their communities. She's committed to partnering with stakeholders to amplify constituent voices so that all Michiganders have the opportunity to thrive. Prior to joining the league, Jamie served as the West Michigan Regional Coordinator for the U.S. Senator Gary Peters. And I was going to say something kind of witty about how it's really a shame that he's leaving, but I shouldn't say that right now. And interned with Grand Rapids Mayor Rosalind Bliss. Jamie has worked with survivors of sexual assault, families experiencing homelessness, in the mayor's greening initiative and affordable housing. Then Amari Fuller joined the league as the Grand Rapids Area Community Engagement Specialist in July 2023. In this role, she works with organizations to connect the dots between policy and everyday life, ensuring that everyone has the skills, resources, knowledge to be effective advocates. Previously, her work included diversity, equity, and inclusion experiences in higher education at Hope College and in the West Michigan business community through her work at the Grand Rapids Chamber of Commerce. Amari has also worked in racial justice organizing and policy advocates at nonprofits and grassroots organizations in Chicago and Southeastern Michigan. Something that we do, or that we did during the pandemic when we were welcoming people to our virtual classrooms, is we did shine. So on the count of 3, we can all give them shine. Not quite an applause, but you guys know what to do. Come on in.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. We're really glad to be here. Especially want to thank you all for coming after 5 o'clock and coming to this. I think that speaks volumes. We're always excited to connect with people. So we're really happy to be here. So go ahead, we'll kick it off and go to the next slide. So a little bit about the league. We've been around since 1912, so we've been around for a long time, starting with, working with people who were incarcerated, people who were living in poverty, and actually children's worker rights, children labor laws. We started right around that time. So we've been doing this work for a long time. It was started by 2 social workers, which always excites me because that is my background and Amari's background. And if you were listening along and caught that, Rennell actually used to hold the position that I hold now, and I was actually in Amari's position. So fun stuff. But everything we do through a racial equity lens. Yes, we still say that. Yes, we still do that. And the league is also home to Kids Count, which is a project through the Annie E. Casey Foundation that looks at child well-being, over 50 parameters of child well-being. We take a look at that and we hold that for the state of Michigan as well. So let's get started and move into advocacy. So what is advocacy? Advocacy is educating people about an issue or the impact of a policy. It's influencing decisions within political, economic, and social systems and institutions. And it's sharing that nonpartisan analysis, research, or study It's general communication to lawmakers or to the public about policy. So it's those op-eds, it's that lovely policy briefs that we put out and we do so many of. It's trying to change things through changing laws. It's also looking to change like workplace policies or administrative policies, like through the Department of Health and Human Services. And it's that straight up education as well, just saying, hey, this is what education does for people. This is how this policy benefits people. That's advocacy. And our biggest thing that we say is decisions are made whether you engage or not. So you might as well find a seat at the table. Everything we do is touched by policy. From when you pick up your trash in the city of Grand Rapids, that's a policy decision on what day that happens. Whether you have city libraries or just county libraries, when you can light off fireworks, how we vote, everything we do, whether we have clean water or not. These are all things that touch us. So policy touches every aspect of our life. So we can sit and be a bystander and let things happen to us, or we can pull up a chair whether we're invited or not and make sure we have part of the decision-making process. Next slide. So two things I kind of want to talk about is you'll hear a lot about lobbying. And oh my gosh, it's such a dirty word, lobbying. It's so scary. We're now talked about corporate lobbyists and not doing stuff for community. And while that certainly does happen, we at the league are registered lobbyists as well. All of our analysts are registered lobbying. So a lobbyist really is whenever you're discussing specific legislation or an action you want a lawmaker to take, and you talk to them about it directly or to the public about that. So it's that vote yes on this bill, on House Bill 232. It's don't make cuts to Medicaid, save Medicaid. Those are our lobbying efforts. Advocacy encompasses lobbying as well, but it also includes that general education piece, what we talked about. And so it goes beyond lobbying. And I think a lot of nonprofits are very scared about whether they can lobby or not, and you actually can. So the league is a 501c3 and we lobby. There's a distinction as to how much you can do and rules around that, but it is something that you can do. And for those that don't want to quite go that far and do get into that lobbying space, you can always stay in that education space. And there's actually terminology right in the statute about how nonprofits can do that. So remember, all lobbying is advocacy, but not all advocacy is lobbying. So moving on from that, next slide, some things that we want you to expect, some of the do's and don'ts of advocacy. So we want to be punctual. We want to show up on time. Luckily on Saturday, the great thing is they're going to be there. So you don't have to worry about making sure you get to that meeting on time. We always say be professional. And this is always a loaded word for me because I think it's perfectly acceptable to show up as yourself. A lot of times though, when you're visiting the Capitol and things of that nature, part of social work is we meet people where they are. And so part of meeting a legislator where they are is stepping up to the and knowing that they're dressed professionally, they're in that space. So I always say it's best to show up professional. Do you have to? No, absolutely not. You don't have to. But I would say that's the recommendation. I think no matter how you are and how you come, you should always be listened to. So the other thing we say is be prepared. So know what you want to talk about. Know exactly, have your talking points ready. Do some research on them, and you want to stay on message. So if you're going to talk specifically about education, don't also pull in stuff about, I also want to talk to you about paid family leave, and I also want to talk to you about this, and I also want to talk to you about that. It gets overwhelming. Stay on message and to the point to what it is that you came to talk to them about. And then follow up later. It's another touch point to talk to people, to talk to that legislator. The whole hope is that you start to build a relationship with that office, with that staff, with that legislator. Because sometimes you're not going to get the legislator. You might get a staff member, and that's perfectly okay. And sometimes that staff member is more knowledgeable about that issue than the legislator is. So if that happens to you, totally okay. Don't freak out about it. They're going to get that message and that information to that lawmaker. But following up is just another touch point to say, hey, we talked about this. You said you were going to do this, or here's that information that you requested that I didn't have. Which brings me to the don'ts. Don't make stuff up. If you don't know something, it's perfectly okay to be like, you know what, I don't know, but I can get that information for you. And guess what? When you follow up later, you can include that information. And that just sets a whole host of, wow, I can rely on this person. They followed through on what they said they were going to do. All wonderful things. And then don't be defensive. So this can be really hard. I've sat in a meeting with a legislator sometime, and I've just been like feeling the blood boiling because they said something that I didn't like. But guess what? That is not the time to be like, you jerk, and go on that. We're not going to do that. We're not going to get defensive. We're going to listen to them. And if they don't agree with us, we're going to thank them for their time and move on to next. Because we're going to find someone else that here's what we have to say and we can move the needle on. Some of them you're just not going to be able to. And that's okay. Move on to next. Don't be on your phone. Make sure you're giving them their undivided attention. And don't use jargon. I think in the world that we are, especially if you're in the nonprofit realm, you'll tend to do this more. There's acronyms for everything. And you'll lose somebody real fast because they are experts in what they came from. If they came from the business sector or farming, or education, whatever the case may be, they might know some stuff about that. But outside of that, they have to be educated. And when we start to get into the technical and we're using the jargon and the acronyms, it's like, whoa, like it's a deer in headlights. They have no idea what we were talking about. So we want to make sure we are explaining things and don't assume that they know stuff. All right, next slide. And remember that legislators are people too. Like I said, they are experts in what they came from. There's a lot that they don't know and a lot that they need to hear from you. You are an expert in your community. You know what your family needs, you know what your community needs. And so own that. Don't go in there thinking that they're above you, because they are not. They absolutely are not. They need to hear from you. And remember, they work for us. So one thing to do is to look up their bio and learn about their personal history. Where did they go to school? What's their background? Were they in education? If you're coming to talk about education and that person used to be a teacher or a principal, you're going to want to pull on that and be like, do you recall any of this? Is this your experience? And they can talk about that. So share your story. Again, you're the expert, and if something has happened to you that's affected you, let them know that. We always say the best thing to do when we're advocating is it's both a head and a heart experience. We've got the data to back things up, but we have to move people from their heart as well. Again, listen to their ideas and responses. Give them a chance to share their views. They might have a good idea that might help you build off what you want to do. Again, be prepared to hear the opposition and what they think, and it might be different. It might be the complete opposite of what we are. But sometimes a lot of them are really open to hear, and there might be another way to move. Maybe it's a little bit less than what you wanted, but it might be a way to compromise. Just be prepared to go with more support for your issue. That's more talking points on your end. Again, be neutral and composed. We're not going to get defensive. And if you have any handouts, I think that is so beneficial. Any written material that you can drop off, because a lot of times they're going to forget things and they can go back to that handout to look at what you were talking about. And be prepared. You're not going to have a lot of time. Sometimes especially on Saturday, when there's meetings like that with lots of legislators, everybody wants their attention and people are coming up to say, oh, hi, oh, it's been so great to see you. And they do a lot of that at these events. So you might not have a lot of time. So be prepared and ready to say what you want to say. And we'll go over that process. But you want to be clear and concise with your message. Let's kind of look at what that looks like. How do you deliver your message? So the first thing is you want to have your main talking point, the main thing you want to say. If you had 10 seconds with them, this is the main thing you want to get across to them. And then follow it up if you've got a personal story of why this policy affects you and why it would help your situation. Sometimes you might have someone else's story if it's been okay for you to share that, or you can share that as well. And then if you still got them, you're going to follow it up with some more supporting points that help your point across. And then finally, the ask. Don't forget the ask. What is it you want them to do? Do you want them to advocate? Do you want with other lawmakers? Do you want them to pass a bill? Do you want them to pass a rule? Fund something? What is the ask? Don't forget that piece. A lot of times that happens. You get your story and some main talking points, but then you forget the ask. That's the main point. So make sure you remember to do that. So with that, I want to take some time to talk about storytelling. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amari.
Thanks, Jamie. All right, so you all have probably heard the words like share your story, advocate a bajillion times over the last few months, right? But we're going to spend some time kind of digging into the anatomy of a story and understanding how to make a story really impactful, particularly when you don't have a lot of time. So what I'm going to go with here for the next couple of slides are from Andy Goodman's 10 Immutable Laws of Storytelling. So if you want to learn more, you can feel free to Google him. But he has some really good tenets to follow as you're developing your story for advocacy. So a couple things I want you to keep in mind. Stories are about people. So typically in the spaces that many of us are in, we are going to be talking about people, whether it's young people, whether it's our own children, our own students. But if you're advocating for like more green space or for expanding a playground or anything that might not be directly related to a person, make sure you bring it back to human beings. Decision makers want to hear how it's going to affect their constituents and the people that they serve. So make sure that you're connecting all of your stories, all of your points back to real people. So in a story, you want to make sure the people in the story actually want something. We're going to talk a little bit more in a bit about how to really flesh that out. But when you're talking through a story, it's going to become clear it needs to become clear throughout the story, and especially at the end, what the person in the story really wants out of the situation. So remember, Jamie talked about making sure you know what your ask is. In storytelling, making sure it's very clear what that main character of your story wants. The third point that we'll talk about is stories stir up emotion. So you heard Jamie talk about how good advocacy appeals to both the head and the heart. So we have the data, MLPP loves the data, right? But we're always talking to our partners about stories and how that data shows up in real life. And many of you are working directly with folks, so you understand that these things are happening. You have the stories to pair with the data. And sometimes, a lot of the times, I've been in legislative meetings where I've asked, like, hey, what do you need from community as you are also advocating for this thing? They want to hear stories. They want to know how it's going to affect you and how it can start to pull on the heartstrings of those folks who are decision makers. And then lastly, they have to have a clear meaning. So if you haven't been able to tell from the first 4 minutes of me talking, I can be a wordy person. So when I'm talking to my friends or if I'm talking to my family, I can go on in circles and take bunny trails about the story because I want them to know all the details, right? I want them to get all of the information. We want to make sure that there's a clear, concise line through all the way our story. So when that person walks away, they know exactly what we were talking about, why we stopped them to talk to them and share the story. So the next part we'll talk about components again. So we're really diving into that anatomy of a good story. What are some components of an impactful story? So these are the chunks that I think about. Now, again, you gotta be looking at this like, Mariah, I don't have time to do 5 different points in my 10-minute legislator meeting. Each of these points should not take too long. This is just a way to begin to think about how to organize your thoughts. So that first chunk in your intro, you want to describe what the everyday life is like for the person that you're talking about, whether it's yourself or someone else. What are things like before whatever event is going to take place in your story? So what is your everyday life? We're going to talk about the event. So there has to be something that changed, that interrupted that everyday life, that either throws your character into a crisis or pushes them to thriving. So in the policy space, it might be a policy that gets enacted that throws your character into crisis. It might be a policy that, like, if this policy happens, then my character will be able to do X, Y, Z things and thrive. So again, when we're thinking about stories, it could be things as they are in a good way or things as they are moving in a negative direction. The next chunk that we'll talk about there is the fallout. So once that event happens, once the thing that we are there to advocate about has taken place, what is the fallout? So what is the immediate impact that on that character's life? And then the deeper impact. So I think about that impact chunked as like the rock bottom. So when the characters really reach the point where the impact is felt very deeply, you want to be able to highlight that piece, right? So we had the initial fallout, and then what does it look like when that person has really moved either into crisis or thriving? And then you want to talk about that new normal. So now that all of this has taken place, what are things like now? So help them understand what is the kind of new normal for the main character of your story. So on this next slide, we're going to talk about storytelling in 7 sentences. So again, you're probably like, Mari, 7 sentences sounds like a lot. Again, think about this as a way to organize your thoughts and organize your thinking. So we're going to use an example for this slide with Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz. I had to read up on The Wizard of Oz because I don't think I've actually ever watched it all the way through. And I was with Jamie in class once, and I said Dorothy was going to Never Never Land, which is totally mixing all of my characters, right? So if we're telling Dorothy's story in 7 sentences, think about these sentence starters. This makes me think about like my early writing career. Teachers, you might appreciate this. You don't have to use the exact sentence starters. It doesn't have to be once upon a time. It doesn't have to sound like a where did she go? Dorothy went to Oz. That's where she went. I think Never Never Land is Peter Pan, Shayla. I was all mixed up too. Um, so it doesn't have to be these exact words, right? But again, think about those chunks that we talked about in the last slide. So that once upon a time is talking about introducing who you are, who your main character of your story is, and what is the setting. What do you want your audience to know about who that person is, how they're currently living, right? So we're introducing Dorothy and Toto if we're talking about once upon a time, right? And that next chunk, and every day, so we're expanding on what is their everyday life like. So in The Wizard of Oz, in the opening scenes, we learn that Dorothy, she feels ignored, unloved. She wants to go somewhere over the rainbow. This is her like world imbalance right before she's thrown into chaos. So that until one day, that's the event that we're talking about, right? So something has happened that throws her world out of balance. So this inciting event or pivotal event kind of really launches the story, the character's development. So with Dorothy, the tornado is that inciting event, right? It picks her up, it takes her somewhere far, far away from home. And then those next 2 sections are because of this. If you have a shorter story, you might have only one because of this. If you want to give some more detail or you have more time, you might have time to go into 2 kind of deeper meanings of what happens. So because of this is kind of where that main character really begins the pursuit of their goals. So because Dorothy got picked up and dropped in Oz, She really wants to get back home, right? She learns her way to get back home is through meeting, I forgot what the guy is called. The wizard, duh, Mari. Meeting the wizard, right? And she's encountering some obstacles along the way, right? Flying monkeys and all the other things that happen in this story. And then she kind of gets like her marching orders, like what does she have to do to get home? What is the obstacle she has to overcome? That second to last section there until finally, so she succeeds in her task. And so now she is able to get back home, right? So then, and ever since that day is how we're wrapping up the story. So we're going to back to our new normal. So in The Wizard of Oz, we learn that like this was all a dream. Dorothy wakes up in her own bed. She realizes she never really left Kansas, and she kind of learns her lesson, her story, right? What we're looking for is often inside us all along. Is like the cute way they put it in The Wizard of Oz. So again, a couple 7 stars kind of guide how you want to move through your story. On the next slide, we'll talk about a story that probably looks a little bit more close to home. So this is what this could look like if we're talking about Gail. She's our main character in this event, right? So once upon a time, remember, we're establishing who's Gail, what is her life like right now? So she has 2 children. We learn who they are. And so in every day, so Gail is a part-time receptionist. She has to leave for work at 7 a.m. And she has to leave her children at the bus stop. Until one day, so remember that inciting event. For in this case, the inciting event is a truancy policy. So she learns there's this new truancy policy that would cause her family to lose cash assistance if either child had 10 unexcused absences. So because of this, again, we're getting into kind of that fallout, right? She wants to drop her children off at the school bus, but was unable to, again, because of how her work schedule was, something many of us can probably relate to, and was kind of struggling to control her son. So she wants him to be in school, right? But there's this chunk of time where he has kind of some agency and he's not making good choices. So and because of this, the family's under tremendous stress until finally Gail gets this letter from DHS saying that her son has been truant and her family will lose their benefits. So in this case, again, we're seeing those chunks of that story. We know the inciting event. And when you read this story, you know why we told this story, right? We're talking about the negative impacts of this new truancy policy and what does that look like for a real family. Now I'll pass it back to Jamie to talk about how to incorporate that with data as well. Oh, Jamie, I think you're muted.
I'm muted, yeah. So when talking about with data, our talking point, now switching to a different example, dismantling the Department of Education would remove protections for thousands of students, especially those for low-income households and those receiving special education services. Talk about my child with Down syndrome and how we had to fight our district over and over again just to make sure she gets the supports that she needs to be successful. We actually had to switch schools in order to do that now that we finally have. If the Department of Education is cut, my daughter's not going to have those protections. My daughter's not going to have it. I'm already having to fight. This is going to be hugely impacted. And so I tell my story and I can talk about, you know, dismantling the Department of Education would also mean a cut in federal funding. Approximately 10% or roughly $2.2 billion of the state's K-12 budget comes from the Department of Education. And potential federal overreach over what is taught in schools. If that funding is cut, the states don't have funding to replace that. My kid's going to lose out. So we want to make sure there are no cuts to the Department of Education. That's our ask. So that's kind of how that process can work. And again, it can be really quick. You can cut things out and go through things really quick based on how much time you have. I mean, this could be delivered in a minute. So from there, next slide, again, after the meeting, if you have time, I think it's always great to send that follow-up email as a way as that touch point just to say, hey, thank you for the time and talking with me. I really appreciate it. And it's another touch point. And hopefully when you meet them again, you can also say, hey, we met at the Education Summit and I would really appreciated talking to you. And then talk about what you want to talk about again. And so they keep seeing you, they know what you're about. You're building that relationship. Again, stay engaged, sign up MLPP for newsletters and alerts. And of course, the K Connect policy and advocacy team. And then uh sign up on Facebook for your lawmaker, attend their hours and other gatherings that they have. Um um and form a relationship outside of asking for something. Just keeping them informed and educated, and helping them with things that maybe they need information or someone to testify, or and they now see you as an expert on that. Those are the type of things that you're hoping to develop. Any questions?
Thank you, Jamie. We are a little ahead of time, which is great. So we do have time for a quick pause to, check out the chat and see if there's any questions. That was very helpful information. Remember, everybody, when it comes to advocacy, might not be on the same level. Some of you may be pros. Some of you have maybe done it several times. I did it twice, and I said, okay, yeah. After the second time, I feel a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more confident. So, yeah, just checking out the chat to see if there's any questions.
Yeah, I also just real quick want to uplift Yara, quoted Brene Brown that stories are data with a soul, and I just love that so much. So that's just kudos for that. And then also, if you have not done this before, it's always really scary the first time, and then you'll get done and you'll be like, oh, that wasn't bad at all. Like, sometimes we build things up in our heads to be a big thing, and it really doesn't have to be. I can't emphasize enough. And I've been in rooms with legislators saying they want to hear from you, and they've stood up and be like, yes, like, we don't know what we don't know. We need to hear what's happening in community. Where can someone find best information about a legislative that is accurate and factual if you're trying to research before talking to them? If you're wanting to know about them, their Facebook page, their landing page, that's about them, their Senate page or representative page usually has an about that person. Sometimes I find, just like, if they went to the same school you went to, it's like, oh, hey, I saw you went to so and so, and they're like, oh yeah, go green. And then it just kind of like brings the tone, and like, oh yeah, we're both people. Like, it helps to do that. So things like that. Their Facebook page is a good one as well. Yeah. And so for the state representatives, Jeff put it in there, senate.michigan.gov and house.michigan.gov. You can look up your legislator and go to their landing page.
I'd also add, Jamie, on their landing page, sometimes it'll list like their committee assignments, so you can get to know kind of what committees they're on, where they might have decision-making power, or like what they have interest in. So that's always good information to know as well. And if you have more questions after you do all that, reach out to your friends at MLPP, and we can go through it together.
Awesome. Thank you both. Thanks, Jamie and Amari. So I'm going to kick it back over to my co-host that is going to engage a little bit with the crowd, looking at the chat, just making sure that we are here for questions. Oh, did you add a question in the chat?
I figured you had the mic, so I didn't want to interrupt.
Yeah. So no, let's do this. So is there anyone else who has any questions? Chris, you can kind of go into your question, but let's have a little bit of a
Okay.
conversation before we bring Jeff in. And also, I did hear Jamie shout out Yara. Yara Barbosa is a teacher at East Kentwood High School, and then also she's one of our policy fellows along with Chris. So I'm so happy that she's on here. She's definitely holding down the chat, and so just great to see her today.
Well, I will save my question, but I'm recognizing that our next guest is already answered the question with a link. Thank you, Jeff. But that said, we did want to take a second to do some kind of crowd engagement. And I'm going to shift it a little bit. We've talked about a lot of different policies. We've talked about things that are making us very impassionate, things that we might want to go to an actual legislator and ask them about. And I think it'd be really appropriate at this time. What particular policies are bringing you all to this space right now? I'm interested if you could just put that in the chat. Jamie brought up a couple of them. One of the things that she talked about is the closing of the Department of Education. Maybe that's something that you're interested in. Go ahead and put that in the chat. Maybe it's something more on your local level, maybe something regarding a school policy, or maybe they're closing a school. Maybe you have a new board seat and those board members are asking teachers to do things that we've never had to do before. Maybe take about 2 minutes and write those in the chat.
Yes, we definitely want to hear from you all.
Yeah.
Which one? Accessible to affordable quality childcare, access to paid family medical leave,
Yeah.
equity in K through 12 education,
Yeah.
access to comprehensive school-based supports. A lot of
Mm.
that's going to be talked about on Saturday. That's important. We need to make sure
Yeah.
that our students not only are in the school and learning, but that they're supported in multiple ways.
Yeah.
Equity and teacher compensation. Okay, educators, if you are on this call and I get to work with the lovely ladies of Shades of Strength and that network, teacher pay is, I mean, it's a conversation that is definitely had in those spaces. Increased access to post-secondary opportunities. Absolutely. And what we will touch on this weekend or on this Saturday is access to wraparound supports for students. It's not just enough that we are getting students into school, but we have to get them through school with the proper support. So what are we seeing here? What are we seeing in the chat?
We've got a couple of
You-
them. Heather Gok is saying some really cool stuff. She's going to be talking about the closing of DOE. Thank you. Want to hear
Yeah.
more about that?
And you don't even have to say a story, just which one. This is the one that speaks to me. This is the one that resonates with me. I'm an educator. This is what's important. So we definitely want to hear from you all. So I'll give it about a few more seconds. It's 33 of us on this call, so I know I can get a few more to see what resonates with you. All right, thank you, Yara, for sharing. That's very helpful. Seasoned advocate on the call, so I love that. I love that. Multiple. I love how seasoned. Yes,
Lowry's.
yes. Equity in K through 12 education funding. Absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah.
One thing, we look at is just the different things that are offered at school. Right now, K Connect is looking at STEAM, math and science proficiency. What type of STEAM or technology or science programming does your school have? Like that, there are discrepancies with that. It's not the same, there's inequities. So definitely important to put those things out there. All right, equity and teacher compensation. Yeah, paid leave for all. Okay, I love it.
Oh,
Keep it coming. And even if we
hey,
move
Miss
on, please
Christina.
put that in there. Oh, it's
Mhm.
always nice when you see familiar names. All right, so
Yeah.
let's actually, you know what? Let's transition. We're gonna get ready for our next speaker. Don't stop putting it in there. Make sure you put those in there so that we know exactly what resonates with you all. This slide is not anything new. Jamie and Amari have already kind of gone through the landscape. So this is very helpful. K Connect had an advocacy day led by MLPP, our policy and advocacy team, Yara, Dr. Shayla Young. I mean, we collectively did, they planned it, but we collectively did it together. And it was a great opportunity to follow through these steps. And so for a beginner like me, it was very important to be able to put my story together. And even some of my community partners that we went to Advocacy Day with, I still remember their stories. So that tells you how much it resonated with legislators. And we were, many of them talked about, we're very open about family and very open about their grandkids. So, advocacy is big and it's something that is that you must learn early. And so having these steps can truly help. If it's not us, we might already have it, but think about the students and the next generation that this could definitely help when they're in a situation or in a room where they're asked to use their voice. So we've learned about it, but now we're going to talk to Jeff Cobb, and he's going to share some how he has done this on the ground. Jeff Cobb is with Ed Trust Midwest, and I see they got you highlighted there, Jeff. So thank you for being with us tonight. He is the Director of Government Affairs. He began his political career working on Capitol Hill before returning to his home state of Michigan. Welcome back. Yep, welcome back to the colder area. During this time working for the Michigan legislator, he was actively involved in drafting and advising on education policy for two state senators. He worked as a senior staffer for the Senate Majority Floor Leader. and finished his time in state government by serving as a parliamentarian for the Michigan Senate, Senate Television, and the Senate Police Department. Most recently, Jeff worked for the Michigan Association of School Boards in their Government Relations Department, where he advocated on behalf of all public elected school board members. Jeff, you are busy. Jeff has more than 2 decades of experience working in Michigan politics. He believes that it's important to make improving our public schools a nonpartisan issue. So, Jeff, you've seen it all. You've been on the ground. And so you are really able to paint a full picture, make it full circle. So I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you for the opportunity to be here. Just want to say that K-Connect has been a terrific partner, and we're really excited to work with them. And we're also we do a lot of work with the Michigan League for Public Policy. They've been terrific to advocate with, and I thought that their presentation was fabulous. And I'm going to borrow some of those sometime if I have to do this again. So they did a great job. You can go ahead and do the next slide. So about Ed Trust Midwest, we are a nonpartisan nonprofit organization. We work in partnership with policymakers, educators, advocates, pretty much anybody who is interested in improving educational outcomes for Michigan students. Our focus is to ensure that students from disadvantaged backgrounds have the resources they need to succeed. And we also support accountability for student outcomes and fiscal transparency for those investments. Next one, please. So I know we're going to talk about advocacy and we're going to talk about the Opportunity Index, but I want to give a little bit of context and background, and then we'll talk about how to engage legislators. But Michigan right now, how state funds students is we have a per pupil allotment. It's called a foundation allowance, and every student or every district gets $9,608 per student. And that puts us at number 7 out of 35 states with similar funding formulas. So that's pretty good. So we're near the top at that. Next slide, please. But when you talk about how we fund students from economically disadvantaged backgrounds, despite gains over the past couple of years, we still are in the bottom 10 states in terms of how we fund those students. And if we're talking about funding for multilingual learners, we're also in the bottom 10 states. For how we fund those students. And so you can see that traditionally Michigan has put the money into the foundation allowance. It's kind of been a one size fits all, and it has not been targeted for students who maybe need additional services. Next slide, please. And so why are we talking about disadvantaged students? Because unfortunately, poverty is a real issue in Michigan, and over 50% of Michigan students come from low-income backgrounds. And I mean, that's a really astonishing number when you think about it, but that's really what drives us and our work to make sure those students have the resources they need to succeed. So in 2023, thanks to partners like K-Connect, like MLPP, we were able to pass into law what we call the Opportunity Index. It's a new funding formula that put us as one of the first 10 states in the country to use concentrations of poverty when we're addressing school funding. So it's a new formula on how we allocate what is traditionally called at-risk dollars. Next slide, please. So how it works. So the Opportunity Index separates districts into 6 different bands based on how many students come from low-income backgrounds. And so you'll see opportunity band number 1. This would be your wealthier, more affluent districts, all the way up to band number 6, which would be your districts with, really severe poverty. And then you'll see a goal weight. So a weight is basically extra on top that they would receive on top of that foundation allowance that I mentioned earlier. So the goal is to give these districts additional funding for these students, between 35% more funding and 47% more funding. However, because the Opportunity Index was only funded by about 1/3, they had to prorate those weights. And so on the far right, you'll see what the actual weights were for this last fiscal year. So if you're in the, one of the wealthier districts, you're getting, a 12% or 13% foundation weight on top of the foundation. And if you're in one of the higher districts, you can get up to 16.66%. Next slide, please. So if the Opportunity Index were funded as it's written in law with those goal weights of 35 to 47%, the Opportunity Index would bring more than $2.9 billion annually to students from low-income backgrounds, and that's why it's so important. But again, we're not at that $2.9 billion mark yet. Next one. I want to just emphasize that when we talk about students from low-income backgrounds, we're talking about students from all over the state. And so when you're talking about the impact of the Opportunity Index, it benefits all geographic regions. I think sometimes there's a misnomer that this only impacts students from like large urban districts, but actually there are winners in towns and suburbs, small and mid-sized cities, rural areas benefit well. And I think this is really key that as we're messaging this, when you talk to legislators, remind them that this impacts their constituents, even if they're in a rural area or a mid-sized city, it's not just impacting our larger urban areas. Next one, please. And this is just a map that kind of shows where the Opportunity Index bands are across the state. You'll see the darker red is the areas that are in Opportunity Band 6. And you'll see pockets of deep dark red all over the state. So Southeast Michigan, West Michigan, even up into the lower or upper northern peninsula. So even way up into Sault Ste. Marie and addition. So next slide. To fund the Opportunity Index as currently exists in law, we would need at least $2 billion more annually than Michigan is spending now on students from low-income backgrounds. Next. So what can we do now? Well, the legislature should commit to funding the weights that are already in law for the Opportunity Index over a period of 5 years. This begins with an investing an additional $400 million in the Opportunity Index for 5 years, beginning with this year's budget, and that would achieve the full funding of the weights in law. So that's what we're specifically asking for this year when we talk to legislators for an additional $400 million for the Opportunity Index. So, your voice matters, and I'm so excited to see everyone here, especially teachers and especially parents, because so we're talking about lobbyists. So I'm actually a registered lobbyist myself. And so that, I can meet with lawmakers, but oftentimes it's much more impactful for, parents and local community leaders and teachers to come in and meet with their lawmakers. So I've got a couple different opportunities to get engaged. So visit the Opportunity for All website, and I'll explain that in just a moment. Contacting your legislators, talking with school leaders, I think is really a key component of advocating for the Opportunity Index. And then finally, we have a fair funding pledge that we would welcome for you to sign on to. So a year ago, EdTrust Midwest launched what we call the Opportunity for All website. This is a website that is designed to educate folks in all communities. And essentially what you can do is you can go onto this website and you can type in your school district, and it will tell you how your district benefits from the Opportunity Index. Next slide. So this is so I highlighted Godfrey Lee Public Schools. So if you went onto the website and you put in Godfrey Lee, this would be what you would see. And so just to explain this, so in FY23, so before we had the Opportunity Index, Godfrey Lee was receiving about $1.7 million for students from low-income backgrounds. Then you'll see that brown bar on the far left. So in FY25, now they're receiving $2.5 million. So it's a pretty significant increase in just a couple of years, about an $800,000 increase. And so that's great. And so we have made significant progress in the past 2 years, and that's that's because a lot of folks have been advocating and doing a lot of the work to educate the legislator and to make the case that these students need additional resources. But if you look at the middle one, the peach one, it's $7.27 million. That's how much Godfrey Lee would receive if they were to fund the weights in law, so that 35 to 47%. If they were to actually fund it like it's actually in law, that would be an additional $5.5 million every year that Godfrey Lee could spend on these students. And then just to compare, if you look at sort of the gold standard, which is Massachusetts, they have much higher weights. And so if you were to fund Michigan, fund these students the way they're funded in Massachusetts, they would be getting an additional, they would get almost $31 million. So you can see that we are doing better than we were. We still have a significant way to go to just get the Opportunity Index funded. But even if you looked at that, we're still lagging behind what the best states are doing in terms of providing resources for these students. Next slide. So tips for talking to lawmakers. And I feel like a lot of this is going to be repetitive from what you heard before, but I think the most important thing is to be prepared. And that's why I think going to that website and looking up how much your district is receiving and the impact it's receiving, I think is really critical, so that you can help share your story. And I love the storytelling idea. I've worked for legislators, and I can tell you that generally they are not moved by like just data. To compel lawmakers, you have to have you have to kind of personalize the stories, talk about how it impacts you specifically, locally, your school. And so I think telling your story is a critical component. And then I think you need to ask for specific action. And so what we're asking for this year is we're asking for, an additional $400 million. That's our ask. And I think the most important thing is to be respectful, because I can tell you, if you meet with legislators, hopefully that is the beginning of a long-term relationship that you're building with these lawmakers. These lawmakers tend to be in office can be up in office for up to 12 years. And they may not agree with you on this particular issue or another particular issue you're lobbying them on, but they may be with you on other issues. And so you want to be able to, you don't want to burn bridges with them. You don't want to get upset and irritated. Not everybody sees things the way we see things. And so you just have to kind of remind that you want to be respectful. And I also want to go back to being prepared too. And I like the idea about looking up senators and representatives, looking up, their bio, because I think that's really helpful to try to build, places where you can find common ground. If you can find that they're really involved in their, in their schools or in their local chamber of commerce, or maybe whatever it is, I think if you can find a connection and establish a rapport with these lawmakers, that goes a long way. And I will also say, because I was staff, I'm kind of biased, but I also think making relationships with staff is supremely important. Staffers tend to move around a lot in Lansing. So you might begin a relationship with a staffer from one legislator's office, and then they might move to another legislator's office. And so you may need something from that legislator. And so it's always important to keep up those relationships with staff. And quite frankly, they're the experts on all this. There are some legislators that will, do the work and really dive into like a long report about school funding, or, get into the details on a particular bill or budget. But I would say by and large, the folks that do that are the staff. And they are and then the staff will then tell their boss, like, hey, I think you should vote this way, or this is what the bill does. And so when you meet with lawmakers, if you meet with their office, I think it's really important to build that relationship with staff. All right, next slide. I really want to highlight the importance of talking with school leaders. And some of the things that you can ask your school leaders is, how has their local district spent these Opportunity Index dollars? And how has the funding impacted student learning and outcomes? So, we're advocates for accountability and transparency. So I think it's really important to know how these dollars are being spent, to make sure they're being spent on, programs and, things that are evidence-based, that have impact. And then how are they measuring that impact? And this is really important because it will help build your story and your advocacy. And I'll be honest, there are some school board members and some superintendents that honestly don't know much about the Opportunity Index. It's not something that they've really ever even looked into, even though it benefits their districts tremendously and would really benefit them. We have been doing several conversations with legislators with superintendents across the state, and had a really good conversation with one from Comstock, which is outside of Kalamazoo. And we started talking, and I'm like, well, how are you spending your dollars? Well, they are providing free summer school for students, which is great. And what they've noticed is that basically that has stopped the summer slide. So when students come back in the fall, they're not behind. They're basically where they were when they left in the spring. And so they don't have to go back and relearn a bunch of things that, they've forgotten over the summer. He mentioned also they're using some of their funding to provide transportation for homeless students, because homeless students, they tend to bounce around. Transportation can be unreliable. It's difficult to, get on a bus route if you're, homeless. And so they have provided that, and that has decreased truancy for homeless students in their district. And so knowing all that superintendent, makes a very powerful case for why we need to fund the Opportunity Index. And so we are engaging them to come talk to his legislator, who happens to be Matt Hall, who's the Speaker of the House, and saying, hey, can you make a call? Can you share the story with your legislator? And so by talking with your school leaders, you're building up even more advocates, and you're building up people who may even have more influence with their legislator than you or I would have, because oftentimes legislators will listen to a school board member, or they will listen to a school superintendent. They might go to their monthly meetings. And so by building up that relationship with school leaders, I think that's a really critical component. Next slide. So I mentioned we have the Fair Funding Pledge. So you can scan the code there with your phone. It'll take you right to a link. Basically what this is you're signing up saying we support fair funding for these students, that we have passed the Opportunity Index. That was a great start, but now is the time to begin to fund the index with the weights that are in law. And you will get onto an email list, and we will send up updates and make sure that you have information and that so you can use when you're going to talk with lawmakers. All right, next one. All right, thank you. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you, Jeff, because we're going to spend the last couple of minutes during our whole night doing some Q&A time. So I'll kick it right back to all of our guests in just a second. And quickly, before I do that, thank you, Jeff. Thank you, all of our speakers. This was fantastic, and we got a lot of great information. But as Jeff said, we have a Q&A portion now. You can put your questions in the chat. I will tell you, I'm going to take some quick privilege, and I'm going to ask Jeff and all of our guests a quick question. I know that just in general, that's my daughter right there. She goes to school. That's why she's really important to this. I know that most of the stuff that we talk about as it pertains to schools and education, the policy specifically, is not mostly a national thing. And I know that when we go to the news, we find out a lot of information about what's happening across the nation, what's happening across the US. But I'm wondering, since most of the education policy happens at a local level, where might we go to stay abreast of what's happening locally? You mentioned the Opportunity Index, Jeff. Where do we go to find information about those kind of things locally and those kind of policies?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have a website at trustmidwest.com, and you can go to that website, and we post blogs and information and all kinds of links that you can get information on that. I would say your local newspapers are a really good source of information. They tend to cover state politics. So like MLive, the Detroit News, the Free Press. I know they do a lot of in-depth reporting on those. You can sign up for our newsletter, and we will send out information. I give a weekly capital update. I kind of highlight which bills are up in committee. Oh yeah, Bridge is a great, yeah, I should have mentioned Bridge. Bridge is a great nonpartisan news source, and they cover state politics. So it's hard because I think sometimes we get drowned out by the national politics. It's more exciting to talk, people are more interested in, talking about that, but really schools are more impacted by state politics than they are by national politics. And so I think it's really important just to keep up on what's happening at the state level.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. Friends, I took my privilege. Now I want to hand the privilege back to everybody in the chat. Please, if you have thoughts, questions from all of our amazing speakers, throw them in the chat. Even if you just want to lift up things that you just like to see, feel free. Now is the time.
Just to add to that, Chris, if there's someone that's like, hey, can I be unmuted? Because it's a lot easier. I'm gonna have a
Oh,
whole two
absolutely.
paragraphs in the
Absolutely.
chat. Then
Yeah,
please let
yeah.
us know. Lift your hand. I mean, we're looking, and we could definitely unmute you to ask your question.
Can I just add a couple more quick things that I am thinking of while we're waiting for people to ask questions? One thing I just want to highlight is I really like the idea of K-Connect doing their legislative day and bringing folks together, because sometimes if you've never done this before, it's great to have strength in numbers and to go with people and so you don't feel like you have to know everything. They can help. We're part of a organization called the Michigan Partnership for Equity and Opportunity. We're going to be hosting a lobby day on May 6th. If you're interested in that, you could reach out to us and we could get you information on that. And even if you're not going with like an organization, you could also bring a friend with you when you go to these meetings. If you're going to meet them at a coffee shop or, when they have coffee hours, bring your friend, bring your mom or dad, bring your, and just because there's always strength in numbers. And so I meant to mention that, and I just want to take that opportunity.
Thanks, Jeff. And I also want to shout out and just see, I can say I lost you. I thought he was still on here. Did Mark jump off? We had Mark Waltman, our VP. Oh, there you are. So I just want to shout out another fellow K-Connect member, our Vice President, Mark Waltman is on the call as well. So I just wanted to shout him out. Awesome. Any other questions? We had a lot of great information. I agree, power in numbers. I felt comfortable being around others during Advocacy Day. And even especially this Saturday at our Education Summit, what makes it so nice is that I have been to town halls where you have, the lawmakers on a panel and they're sitting on a stage and everyone's on, and it's nothing wrong with that. And then, the audience is in the crowd. But it feels a little bit different when you're sitting at a table having a conversation and sharing thoughts. And so our goal this Saturday is to make it as comfortable as possible. And thank you, Deshaun and Katie. It read my mind. You put up our Education Summit Day. So I will tell you all, I told my 18-year-old about the day, and she's coming as well as many other students. So please come by. It's at the Grand Rapids Center for Community Transformation. You can go to the K-Connect website where they put the link in the chat. So thank you all. We've done a lot around this Education Summit. Why we're having this virtual session today is in preparation. We also have hosted podcasts with various leaders in our community to share how policies impact them and some of the resources that they provide to students around student well-being. So we really wanted to make a safe space where those can voice their opinions, no matter where you are in the community, and learn as well in here. So there'll be quite a bit of speakers, a gallery walk to get to engage and interact with with other community partners and students, and we'll have a panel and then as well as that table discussion. And I will highlight that we will have lunch there as well. So while you're there, you will get an opportunity to eat. And then we'll have something to grab around breakfast as well when you all come. So there is food. So that's also very helpful. So yeah.